定呀。好靚。咩事啊？
冇啊，問你要唔要？要唔要？
你有冇問啊？
冇啊。
你唔使問，我都覺得靚。No, it's okay. 你擺喺你鼻哥。Yeah. You do you, mama.你死咗咩？嚇？
你台手機亦都係啊，所有嘅 app 嘅 notification 全部turn off佢啊。
They're off.
我會檢查。
Okay. 色。
on maize and other staple crops for survival. Because there are metric buttloads of trees in this region, that determined the kind of infrastructure they built for their society and see how geography shaped their way of life. So just for poops and giggles, let's start over here and meet the societies of the Northeast, Mississippi River Valley, and the Atlantic coast. And hey, make sure you know at least one specific example from each of these regions, even if they're not the ones that I mentioned. Okay, here in the Northeast, let me introduce you to the Iroquois. Now, they were semi-sedentary and relied on maize and other staple crops for survival. Because there are metric buttloads of trees in this region, that determined the kind of infrastructure they built for their society, namely the longhouse. Now, this is a structure in which multiple generations of a family would live together, sometimes up to 200 of them. Then further south, structure in which multiple generations of a family would live together, sometimes up to 200 of them. Then further south, meet the Cherokee. Now, maize cultivation reached them about 1000 BCE, along with beans and squash, which meant that their society was built around agriculture. However, they would also qualify as semi-sedentary because men still hunted for meat while women usually tended the crops, and they moved around according to the seasons to gather wild crops. In fact, like many other indigenous groups, Cherokee women had far more social capital than their European counterparts. And that means that many of their cultures were matrilineal, meaning that power and possessions were passed down through generations on the mother's side, not the father.
Well, that don't sound right.
Well, yeah, Derek, not in Europe where everything was real patriarchal and focused on the men folk, but that's how it was here in the Americas. And then moving west, let me introduce you to a group of societies known as the Mississippian culture. Now, because of the abundance of rich soil around the Mississippi and Ohio River valleys, these people were able to exist in large towns, about 4,000 to 6,000 in population. Also, since they lived near complex river systems, they traded extensively with other groups. And all of this meant, like I said before, that these societies became more complex with the development of social hierarchies. And the largest of the Mississippian settlements was Cahokia. The abundance of rich soil around the Mississippi and Ohio River valleys, these people were able to exist in large towns, about 4,000 to 6,000 in population. Also, since they lived near complex river systems, they traded extensively with other groups. And all of this meant, like I said before, that these societies became more complex with the development of social hierarchy. And the largest of the Mississippian settlements was Cahokia, in which something like 10 to 20,000 people lived.
Now that is a lot of teepees.
Derek, they did not live in teepees. It was like an urban environment, like a city. Whatever, let's just keep moving west into the Great Basin and Great Plains region. Now, because the climate of these regions is real hot and dry, indigenous groups living here responded to their environment by developing nomadic lifestyles, which is to say they moved around instead of staying in one place. And a good example here is our friends, the Ute. Now, they lived in groups of 20 to 100 extended family groups and moved through the region on a seasonal basis while living in mobile shelters like animal skin teepees.
I knew it.
Yeah, some indigenous groups did live in teepees, and the Ute were one of them. Ute men were typically responsible for hunting animals like deer, antelope, and most of all, buffalo buffalo while women gathered berries and roots. And finally, let's move all the way to the Northwest in present-day California. And in general, these societies did not practice agriculture. And that might make you think that they were nomadic, like the Great Basin and the Great Plains groups.
Don't be crazy.
No, groups like the Chinook and the Chumash built permanent settlements, not because they were farmers, but because they were able to find metric buttloads of food in the ocean and the surrounding environment that made sedentary societies possible. So that's just a sampling of what everything was like in the Americas up to 1491. But hold on to your butts because it's 1492 and here come the Europeans. And they didn't just show up for poops and giggles. No, there were in fact many causes, which I will consolidate here under the headings of gold, God, and glory. and let's look at each in turn. So the Europeans showed up to the Americas for gold, which is to say they had economic motives. A long story short, prior to this period, Europe was kind of like the hey-hey of world powers, just sort of along for the ride, not really contributing anything meaningful to the story, and good for a chuckle now and then. But then came the Renaissance with all of its innovations and cultural changes, and all of a sudden, Europeans wanted to get fitted for some power pants. Now, the first problem they had was that in 1453, the Ottoman Empire went ahead and gained control over the land routes that connected Europe to Asia for trade. And that meant that Europeans couldn't get the goods they wanted anymore on their own terms without going through an annoying middleman. So they got cranking to figure out how to get to the Asian and Southeast Asian markets via the sea to cut out the aforementioned annoying middleman. Now, they were able to do this because of two developments. First was new techniques in shipbuilding and the adoption of maritime technology. The Portuguese, for example, developed a new kind of ship called the caravel, which was fast and highly navigable thanks to its use of the lateen sail, which could take wind from both directions. And European navigators made use of older Arab and Chinese technologies like the magnetic compass, which reckoned direction, and the astrolabe, which reckoned latitude. All right, now the second development was the rise of joint stock companies to fund exploration among several European powers. Basically, a joint stock company was funded by several investors as opposed to a single source of funding like a government. It turned out that when these explorations went well, it was fabulously profitable, but when they failed, everything was lost. So joint stock companies made it so that many investors could pool their wealth in order to fund an expedition, and if it failed, they would only lose their portion. But if it succeeded, then we going to Disney World, y'all. Anyway, it turned out that Portugal would be the first to try out their sea legs, and that ended up paying handsomely. Under the leadership of Prince Henry the Navigator, the
If I'd have gone
Portuguese
with the teacher.
I think she was a pretty good teacher. Okay. It's not these, because look, they're tails, right? And that's what lipids have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so X that out. I hope you understand I'm really BSing off of history, off of science, I don't remember. Okay. It's not this one because they're diamonds, right? So that's sugar, right? There's glucose
How do you know that?
because they're diamonds. I think that's the reason, because they're diamonds.
So it's not none
Proteins
of
are
these?
usually in chains. And proteins are DNA, right? I don't remember. Are proteins DNA? Because if it's DNA, this is the answer.
Oh no, I haven't heard of anything yet, bro.
I would think that's the answer. Wait, don't trust me. Wait, it's either lipids.
So this whole thing's not
That's
correct, right?
obviously a lipid. That's a lipid.
Lipid because it has the tail,
It
right?
has
So
the
none
tail.
of these are right.
Yeah. I would not say this either because I remember that's glucose. Because,
Yeah, because it's carbon.
yeah, that's. And then what's the last one? Glucose. Carbohydrates. No, carbohydrates is glucose. So there's proteins, amino acids.
Wait, let me check. If you go back to the slides, proteins are made of amino acids, right?
Yeah.
So you need R.
Variable side chain, go back. That's the variable side chain.
How do you know?
Because it can vary. How do you undo?
There's the eraser, man.
I need to zoom in. Can I zoom in? Okay, also, what were the four main groups again? Tell me. I really can't remember.
Carbohydrates, lipids, and I forgot the last. I haven't even learned the last one.
Proteins. Well, if you haven't learned the last one, I've already narrowed it down. Have you seen this one yet?
I haven't seen
Yes,
either.
you have. H2NO. H2NCH. Four. What are these called? Four groups. Lipids.
Carbohydrates.
What's the last one? Nucleic acids.
What's that?
Nucleic acids are DNA.
How do I see what DNA is?
You won't learn this yet, but this is DNA. This is your protein. This is DNA because you will notice you're gonna have to remember this. A, C, T, and G. I don't remember how they bond, but apparently T goes to A, C goes to G, okay? Remember that.
Okay.
That's what you'll see that in DNA all the time. RNA, it's only one. DNA is double, right? You know the picture of DNA, it's double strands, right?
Yeah, and then there's like things connecting.
Yeah, that's like a twisted ladder. This is your ladder right here, okay? And these are to the side. I really don't remember what they are. And that's... Anyways, this is your answer.
Do you need this stuff for acid too, bro?
No, only if I take the ACT. I don't plan to take the ACT. That's your... Yeah. I actually remember shit.
So I can tell this one's lipids,
Yeah,
right?
That's
But this
lipid.
one's carbs.
those are carbs. Because carbohydrates that have glucose, right? Carbohydrates, they have glucose,
Yes,
right?
they
Glucose
create
is sugar.
glucose.
Sugar always has this shape. If you remember when you did photosynthesis, you saw a lot of these. And you will see a lot of those once you're in AP Chem and AP Biology. This is your answer. Because that's DNA.
decided to try sailing around Africa to access the riches of the Indian Ocean trade. And as they sailed around Africa, they established permanent trading posts along the coast where they would trade goods with various African groups. In doing so, they established what's known as a trading post empire, which was really about controlling these small strategic posts as opposed to establishing full-blown colonies. So this was going real good for Portugal, and they were gaining embarrassing amounts of wealth. So Spain was like, dang, we gotta get us some of that. But Spain had a problem. You see, Portugal had already gotten control of the strategic points around Africa and into the Indian Ocean, so the only option was to sail west across the Atlantic.
But they couldn't do it because the earth was all flat.
No, Derek, everybody knew that the earth was round during this period, mainly because that problem had been solved by the ancient stinking Greeks. Anyway, that's when an Italian sailor named Christopher Columbus showed up to the Spanish court looking for money to fund an expedition westward to reach Asian markets. And at that, the monarchs of Spain, Ferdinand and Isabella, were like, "Eh." And so off Columbus went. And in October of 1492, he reached an island in the Caribbean, and thinking he had reached the East Indies, he called the indigenous people Indians. Now, even after returning 3 more times, he never stopped believing that he had reached Asia. It fell to other Spanish explorers like Amerigo Vespucci to confirm that what Columbus had stumbled upon was in fact a new world hitherto unknown to Europeans.
Amerigo Vespucci.
So what you were saying earlier, this is a nucleotide, right?
Yeah.
That's a whole nucleotide. I only need one, right? Circle one nucleotide. This is a whole nucleotide.
Oh. Did you watch the video?
There is no video for this one.
Nucleotides have 3 parts: sugar, base, phosphate group. Back. This.
That whole thing?
It's gotta have 2 of them. You gotta have all 4 letters.
Where do you... But it says there's only 3 parts, right?
You need the sugar.
Yeah.
Go back. There's your sugar. Right?
Which one's sugar?
The blue one. I told you, all sugars have this shape, right?
Light blue, right?
Yeah, the blue one. Now back.
Okay.
You need the bases. And tell me what the bases are.
ATCG.
ATCG, right?
Okay.
Back. Phosphate group, go back.
I don't even know what phosphate is, right?
The phosphate group is this stuff. You see the P? There's a P written here. There should be a P. I can't see. Is there a P?
PP.
Yep. I think phosphate is P2O3. Let me search this up. Phosphate formula. Phosphate is PO4, and then you'll see a P, and then you'll have 4 O's around it. See
1,
it?
2, 3, 4.
Yep. That's your phosphate.
And what do those two lines mean?
What two?
You
Point
see
it out,
like P
point it out.
and then there's like the two lines. And
That's
these are
going
one
into
lines.
AP chemistry, but do you really want to know?
Yeah.
Pull up the periodic table. Okay, zoom in, I can't see. Okay, so, bear with me, my knowledge is limited. How you read it, 1 tells you how many electrons are there. Electrons are negative. Electrons equal protons, right? Because you want the charge to be
Mhm.
0. But if you'll notice that phosphate is PO4 3 minus, right?
Mm.
Yeah. But if it's good, it's good. That's a special case, and I don't want to talk about that yet. All of these here on the edge, they
Can you not
fill
do
up.
that to the computer?
Oh, I forget it's touchscreen. All of these on the edge, I'm not touching. They have a full outer shell. Yep, this is AP something. They have a full outer shell. Come here. Like
In here.
boron, if I draw it, rule of boron is that the first shell always has 2, okay? Boron has
14.
5.
You said the one on the bottom.
I said boron.
No, but you said the one.
Okay,
on the
sorry.
bottom
I was
is
talking
the-
about boron. Okay, yeah. Where's the 14?
14 or 24, whatever that number is.
I don't remember what that number is. This number here is the weight of it. You gotta. Boron has 5, so you have 1, 2 right now. So you need 3 more, right? Bless you. On the outer shell. If you count it up, you have 5, right?
Mhm.
Well, all electrons want to have a completely full shell, and that would be 8. You want 8 on the outside, okay? So
8 outside.
you want 8 on the outside, yeah. Right now you have 3, so you need 5 more, right?
Yes.
So now you're gonna look for a different one that has 5 on the outside, and that would be a nitrogen. Here's a shortcut. You won't remember, but it's a shortcut. Once you hear it again, you'll remember that
Okay,
I
just
told
tell me
you.
what the lines mean.
I'm getting there. This has a 13, right? You subtract 10, that means that the valence electrons, the outer shells, there's 3 valence electrons. You want to find one that has 5 valence electrons, so you would go to 15. Okay. That would be nitrogen. So how we draw it is like this, because you could assume that it already filled up shell, okay? And nitrogen would be like this, right? You want to connect these, B and N, right? You connect it like this, and this, and this, right? So how you would show that is like this. That's
But
where the
how
double
come
shell
P
came
doesn't
from.
have the
P, can you tell me how many valence electrons P needs?
5.
5. 1, 2. Okay. It needs 5, but for a full octet, you need 8, right? And if each line counts for 2, this already has 8. P has 8, right?
PSA.
P has 8. P has
PSA
8.
what?
Each line is 2, right?
Each line is 2.
Yes.
Really? 2,
Did we not just do it? Did we not just do this? Look, this was a line 1, 2.
Oh, 2 dots. Okay.
Yeah, it's 2 dots. P has a completely full outer shell now. That's why there's 2, because you needed 2 like that. But oxygen could only give 2. This one has given 1, but it needs to get rid of another 2. We know. Oxygen has 4. It needs to get rid of another 2.
I don't need to learn this yet, right?
No, you don't need to know this. That's why I asked if you wanted the explanation. Basically, it's 2 because it needs 2 more electrons. That explains the electrons.
So it just needs.
Just remember that when she says, okay, just memorize. Phosphate is PO4, okay?
PO4 3 negative.
Don't care about the 3 minus. Just remember when she says nucleotides and they have a base, which is the sugar. They have the code, which is A, T, C, or G, and then they have the phosphate group. Phosphate group is PO4. Just remember that. And sugar is always a hexagon. That's all you need to know about nucleic acids. That's all I remember about nucleic acids. I'm gonna assume that's the big summary of it.
Anyway, Spain started colonizing the Americas quickly. Fast and in a hurry, and since we're still talking about economic motives for exploration, let's focus on that. Spain sent conquistadors to the Americas to subdue populations and find wealth, and as it turns out, they very much did. For example, the Americas to subdue populations and find wealth, and as it turns out, they very much did. For example,
Thank you. Hernan Cortez toppled the Aztec Empire with only a few hundred men, and I'll get to the reasons for that later. And then Francisco Pizarro did the same thing down with the Thank you. You're welcome. You job, yeah?
Inca Empire, and both ventures resulted in metric buttloads of gold and silver being sent back to Spain, which made them wealthy beyond belief. But that wealth also fundamentally transformed European social and economic reality. The biggest effect of this influx of wealth was that it hastened the end of feudalism and replaced it with capitalism. And essentially the difference between the two is this. In feudalism, land equals wealth and status. In capitalism, capital, or owning the means of production, equals wealth. So this was a pretty big change, although to be fair, feudalism was already on the way out, but these developments definitely helped it out the door. Anyway, we need to spend a little more time with Spain's economic motives because they were very much winning the imperialism game in the Americas. It's pretty easy to argue that Spain would not have continued to fund voyages to the Americas if it were not for the prodigious amounts of wealth coming in, as was reflected in a common proverb from the time. As long as y'all got the G's, we'll keep sending the C's. C's is short for conquistadors. I'm sure it's a lot more elegant in the Spanish. Anyway, it's true that initially Spain's wealth came in the form of gold and silver. However, they soon found that agriculture and the export of cash crops would be a massive moneymaker in addition to the export of precious metals. And so they imposed various labor systems onto their colonies, only one of which I'm going to tell you. It was called encomienda, and by definition, it was a system of coerced labor in which the Spanish crown granted tracts of land to Spanish colonists, known as encomenderos, who forced indigenous people within its borders into plantation-based agriculture and mining. Or, said in simpler terms, the Spanish government gave their colonizers a plot of land to farm, and whatever indigenous people happened to live on that land became the farmer's band of slave labor. But, in return for that labor, the encomenderos were supposed to provide protection and Christian education to the indigenous populations, but as these things go, it really just became a form of communal slavery. And on these plantations, they grew highly profitable crops like sugarcane and tobacco.
Oh.
Cotton, etc. And now that this colonial machine was just printing cash for the Spanish, it became a real problem when indigenous laborers kept running away or dying from disease, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. Anyway, in order to keep the wealth flowing, Spain gradually replaced indigenous slaves with enslaved African laborers. Spanish merchants and other colonial powers as well partnered with West African groups in order to trade goods, guns being the most desirable good for enslaved Africans from the interior of the continent who were often captured in wars or raids. And many of the African groups involved in the trade of people became wealthy and also powerful owing to the superior weaponry they gained in trading with the Europeans. And so gradually, enslaved Africans became the dominant labor system in Spanish America, and Spanish wealth only continued to increase. Okay, now the last thing you need to know under this heading in reference to Spain is how they kept control of their American colonies. And one of the most significant means of control was the Spanish caste system, which was a complete reorganization of the social structure of societies in the Americas according to a race-based hierarchy. Now, to be clear, this kind of structure was not in place among indigenous peoples before the Spanish came. It was wholesale slapped upon them by the invading Spanish in an attempt to maintain control of their wealth-producing opportunities. And I'll keep it real simple. The folks on top of the hierarchy were Spaniards, especially those who were actually born in Spain. At the bottom were indigenous and African people. And then there were various levels in the middle that represented mixed-race people who were the result of European, context. Basically, the more white blood a person had, the purer they were considered to be, and therefore higher on the hierarchy, and vice versa. And that brings us to the second cause of European exploration, namely God, which is to say there were also religious motivations. Now, to really understand this, you have to know that during this time, much of Europe was in the middle of a religious crisis and lots of instability that came along with it. So the dominant belief system in Europe since the dang Roman Empire was Christianity, which was represented by the Roman Catholic Church. And yes, there was a major split in the church in the 11th century, but we're going to leave that to the side for our purposes. All you really need to know is that after that split, Western Europe became the bastion of Roman Catholicism. But in 1517, a saucy Catholic monk by the name of Martin Luther went ahead and started the Protestant Reformation, which split the Christian church in Europe once again. The point is, European states were choosing sides as Catholic or Protestant, and the conflict was highly charged as religious conflicts